Well, staying in Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky received some very special visitors late Sunday night. It was the first official visit of the U.S. Top diplomat and Defense Secretary and Antony Blinken and Austin Lloyd arriving in Ukraine late in the evening. It's the first time they're visiting since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Both men announced a gradual return of U.S. diplomats and the nomination of a new ambassador. Well, Secretary Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd were in Poland the day before, arriving in Kyiv. Both men have really strong opinions about what's going on in Ukraine.
The rest of this war will unfold, but we do know that a sovereign, independent
Washington correspondent Maria Byrd has been monitoring the situation from where she is. Maria, this shows support from the U.S. I mean, Antony Blinken almost never happened yesterday, and that's because the White House did not confirm this visit. We know why. U.S. top diplomats or U.S. officials, senior officials, really do not disclose, their itinerary like that. But about the visits now, President Zelensky was pretty happy to have both of them. He was the one who made the announcement about both men visiting Kyiv. So how important was it for him to have the U.S. Secretary of State in Kyiv as a show of support for Zelensky? I mean, what really happened, what really transpired between both of them, and how is this a boost to Zelensky's image as a leader of Ukraine in this period of the war?
Thank you for that question. I think that it's clear, as you said, the White House would not confirm the visit. And I think that Zelensky coming out and saying the visit was going to happen even gave him more, I think, of official status. I mean, it let him know or let the world know that he is someone that the main leader, the U.S. has served as a leader in this, and they've been very outspoken since before the war even happened as it relates to their support of Ukraine. And so this, I think, just definitely supports and it gives him a political boost globally to say the U.S. is listening. The U.S. is definitely a supporter. Not only are they putting financial resources and not only are they speaking from their home in the U.S., but they have now come and they have sent their top international official. The Secretary of State is just as important in some instances, and if not more viable to the international community than even our president and vice president. So his presence there, I think, definitely set a tone for where the U.S. stands and where the U.S. will continue to stand. Obviously, the Secretary of Defense being there shows that the U.S. is not only saying we're going to provide some training tools and some resources, but we are now sending our top official for our military to come and provide assistance. And as we know, the meeting went far beyond what was anticipated. You talk about 3 hours of a discussion. It was clear that they were looking through strategies and ways in which to ensure what they believe that the Ukrainian people and that Ukraine is winning this war.
And, 3 hours of talks, of course, a lot must have come up in that. And I'm wondering the echo back home in the United States. I know a lot of Americans do support Ukraine at this time. I mean, we've seen it. Even the Orthodox Christian services yesterday, many churches were holding services alongside, Ukraine, as many of the churches in Ukraine as well, in many of those battered cities also held those Christian services. So in terms of, U.S. leadership, I mean, the lawmakers, the Republicans, the Democrats, what was the message for them, having both leaders down in Kyiv with President Zelensky?
I think this is, I don't want to say it's expected, but I think many Americans, and as you said, lawmakers are in support of the U.S.'s stance. But I know that the U.S. has has not somewhat of a short attention span at times for things. And so their visit there, I think, is really trying to move things forward to try to come to an end of the war, because you're exactly correct. I think that as much as Americans have supported it, there are some economic challenges and some challenges that the U.S. is facing at home, which will become even more of a concern for Americans, especially as we continue months and as it's speculated it could be another year more of a war. And I think that would definitely be a challenge for many Americans as we look at the amount of funding and resources that are headed toward Ukraine. And we know an additional $713 million will be sent over.
And Maria, that funding has been extended to allied partners as well. But then let's take a look at both men's account of what's happening on ground. And they both seem to suggest or say that Russia is losing the war. Perhaps they're also attributing all of this to the amount of support, military support the U.S. has sent to Ukraine.
You're exactly correct. And the weakening that you hear them speak of is that Russia is weakening. And I think that is really where the defense secretary and the secretary of state are focusing on, is how can we continue to support Ukraine in weakening the presence of Russia? Because obviously, the more Russia continues with this war, continues to invade Ukraine, the more it actually impacts the global economy and the global trade enterprise. And so that is a major concern of the U.S. And so it's the utmost importance for the U.S. to continue to provide that support to Ukraine to ensure that Russia is weakened, and so that we can come to an end of this war and move forward as a world.
Well, Maria, I know that there will be. Okay, sorry, just before you go, and I know that we've heard this, oftentimes repeated, how President Zelensky wants President Joe Biden to visit Kyiv. So I know the White House is keeping mum about this, but what are we hearing on the ground?
On the ground, there's not much conversation about that, but I would not be surprised if we do see President Biden. It just really depends on what happens in the next couple of weeks. As you talked about earlier, railroad explosions, some of these major casualties that are happening. And if I think the U.S. doesn't see major movement forward to coming to really Ukraine being able to topple, as you said earlier, there's an ambassador, they're sending diplomats back. So I would not be surprised if the U.S., we don't see President Biden at some point come to Ukraine. Will it be in the next week or so? I think that's a bit questionable, but at some point in the near future, potentially. He ran on being a foreign affairs expert, and that's kind of where his longevity and history lies with his political career.
Yeah, and I know there have been lots of criticism about the way the president has handled this war in Ukraine and America's support for Ukraine. Maria, thanks again.